Hi, we're now in week 11, Sociology. We're drawing near an end. And our focus today is going to be looking at the classification of crime. Street crime, corporate crime. We're going to look at the different categories, what's included, what's not included. We're also going to look at the structure of the justice system here in Canada. Where do the police fit into this? Where do laws fit into this? And that'll take up the bulk of what we'll do in this particular week. We'll also touch a wee bit on the future and where that might lead in terms of Canadian society. Now this one will give us some insight as to the stuff that we talked about last week. Where does it fit within Canadian structure of criminal justice? And how does it apply will be somewhat discussed here as well. All right, so good luck, and we'll see you next week when we get into our last chapter. We're getting close. Bye now.
Okay, so we're going to start with looking at street crime and how sociologists classify crime. And they classify crime based on how they are committed and how a society views offenses. And there's three types. There's street crime, occupational or white collar or corporate crime, and then organized crime. And so when we think in terms of street crime, we can consider there's violent, property, and moral. Now most of these you are probably familiar with, and that's how it is that they're described as street crime, is that as you recall from last week when we looked at some of the theorists, as some of the theories behind why might one group of people or another commit a violent crime, property crime, or moral crime. But it's not the only type of crime, but it gives you an idea in terms of categories what street crime is. And then there's occupational and corporate crime. Occupational white-collar crime consists of illegal activities committed by people in the course of their employment or in the dealing with their financial affairs. And there's key elements here is violation of the position of trust in business or government. Now with corporate crime, illegal acts are committed by corporate employees on behalf of the corporation and with its support. Examples of this would be the antitrust violations, false advertising, infringements on patents, copyrights, trademarks. This is a fairly large sort of business. In fact, some of the costs associated with corporate crime is that it exceeds that of street crime. Tax evasion, the costs of about $30 billion a year in Canada. That's a big pile of change. Calgary Bre-X gold mining company lost about $5 billion of shareholders' money. In their investment, a geologist had salted the coarse samples with gold. Salted is in quotations, and really what it means is that they sprinkled gold dust in some of the samples to make it appear as if a gold finding had been found. Automobile and computer repair shops doing unnecessary work or charging for it, occupational accidents and illnesses were a third leading cause of death in Canada. Some of the causes were unsafe working conditions. The problem is there's more stigma associated with street crime, and it's hard to convict. Now, the third type of crime is that of organized crime. Organized crime is a business operation that supplies illegal goods and services for profit. Now, for example, you'd be looking at drug trafficking, prostitution, liquor and cigarette smuggling, loan sharking, money laundering, and large-scale theft like truck hijacking. Truck hijacking is becoming very, very popular. They steal and hijack a truck and then sell the goods on the market. Some of the elements associated with organized crime, it's not a centrally controlled organization. There may be a single boss, but they're not all located in one location. The public demand for cheap goods encourages the crime. So as long as we want cheap goods, chances are they'll continue to be organized crime. The deadly nature, well, biker gangs in Montreal have resulted in many deaths associated with them and as well as innocent people. And it's linked oftentimes to legitimate enterprises. For example, some of the terrorist groups that use Muslim charities to gather illicit funds or for nefarious ends. ISIS and oil sales from the overtake of oil fields, they make about $50 million a month. And so organized crime is pretty significant in its damage, if you will, to overall society and the cost of that. So when we think in terms of, well, crime, well, how much crime, we need to look at crime stats. And there's a variety of ways to look at them. There's two ways we're going to look at what crime stats, how they get gathered. Official crime statistics provide important information on crime. However, the data reflects only those crimes that have been reported by police. People are more likely to report crime when they believe that something can be done about it, and a number of crimes reported to the police. The Canadian Uniform Crimes Report are just the tip of the iceberg when compared to all the offenses actually committed. What you're seeing here would be the crime rates between 1962 and 2009, and you're seeing them divided up by property, by violent crime, by other crime, and total amount of crime. And this would be gathered from the Canadian Uniform Crime Reports, and this would be of reported crimes. Now, in addition, you can see the homicide rates. And what's interesting about the homicide rates is that the number of homicides have actually begun to decrease since the 90s. It hit its peak in the 70s, it declined somewhat and had a bit of a spike, and then it's come back down again. Now, the other form of surveying that comes in are victimization surveys. There we go. Victimization surveys are anonymous self-reports of criminal behavior have made researchers aware that the incidence of most crimes is sustainable, higher than reported by the Canadian Uniform Crime Rates. One survey found that less than 42% of victimization reports by respondents had been reported to police. Now the value, that's a victimization report right there, survey anyway, in a graph form. The value in terms of the additional information with both kinds of statistics, a truer picture of the reality of crime is possible. The accuracy of the CUCR, that's the Canada Uniform Crime Report, is greatest for its very serious crimes such as homicide, which is almost always reported. For crimes like auto theft, where significant loss can be replaced by an insurance company if the crime is reported, available statistics do not provide any information about victimless crimes, such as drug use or illegal gambling. Now, if we carry on and look at street crimes by criminals, who's more likely to commit crime? We look at the demographics. Who is more likely to commit street crimes? Well, what are the correlates of street crime? Now, the correlates aren't causes, but these are when crime occurs. These are the associated things that occur at the same time. So when we look at these sort of patterns, it doesn't mean that these are the cause. For example, the first pattern is that of age. And age is important in that one of the most significant factors of crime is that arrests increase from an early adolescence and peak at young adult and then steadily decline with age. This pattern reveals that crime is a young person's game, common in all societies where data is available. And why? Well, adult is a time of expected conformity. Also, simple maturation process seems relevant. We just get too old to participate in some of those activities. But it's not the only demographic we can look at. We can also look at gender. Another one of the most significant factors. And when we look at patterns, most crimes are committed by males. Some statistics, men make up 80% of those charged with a crime. They are more involved in violent crime and major property offenses. However, there is a narrowing of the gap. From 1968 to the year 2000, that percentage of offenses committed by women increased from 9% to 17%. Now, another connector is that of class. Lower class people are more overrepresented in arrests and in prison admissions. And the question begins with why? Is it because they commit more crime, or are they more likely to be targeted? Suicide, alcoholism, mental illness, and drug addiction are more common in lower class communities. On the other hand, occupational or white-collar crime, costing Canadians more than street crime, is higher among the middle and upper class. And then lastly, we can look at, as a demographic issue, is race. Now, according in U.S. statistics, it's African and Hispanic people who are more likely to commit street crime than any others. And in Canada, non-Aboriginal visible ethnic minorities were underrepresented in federal correction institutes. Aboriginals, many studies have shown that they are overrepresented in prison. Now, if you have had to run up against the justice system, let's look at how it is structured. And so when we think on the criminal justice system, it includes the police, the courts, and the prisons. However, it's not a large, complete, and unified system. Rather, it is a collection of somewhat interrelated, semi-autonomous bureaucracies. So let's begin with police. Their function is that they are the concrete extension of the state, the government, to provide for social order. This is extended to maintain peace in the community. They have a broad range from, finding lost children, counseling crime victims, notifying next of kin in fatal accidents. What ties these diverse functions together is that they have the authority. Authority is backed by non-negotiable force, and they have a high degree of discretion. That is, ability to make some decision about how far or what they do as a consequence of some of the behaviors that they will witness. Now, if we look at the courts, essentially they decide the guilt or the innocence of those accused of committing a crime. And the process is adversarial. Adversarial in that there's a prosecutor. This is the lawyer who represents the state or represents the government. There's a defense lawyer, asserts that the accused or the defendant is innocent. And then there's a judge or jury, and the final decision as to the guilt of the innocent of the defendant lies with them. Excuse me. Okay, now what we're going to be seeing in the next slide is if you've been found guilty of some crimes, prison is the third point. Punishment being the concept there, and punishment is any action designed to deprive a person of things or value, including liberty, because of some offense the person has thought to have committed. And so when we think in terms of punishment, or the functions of punishment, we can look at retribution, social protection, rehabilitation, and deterrence. So these are parts of the function of punishment. Now, punishment isn't the only solution. We've seen other solutions. For example, restorative justice. This is where they seek to return the focus of the justice system to repairing the harm that has been done to the victim and to the community. And the elements is that there's involvement of the victim and other members of the community as active members of the process. And the attempt is to reconcile offenders with those who they have harmed. And the roots is in more traditional societies. Now, what might, be the future of deviance and crime? Well, it's hard to say. Now, the present system cannot solve all the problems of crime, and more structural solutions like better education, better jobs, affordable housing, more equality, less discrimination, and socially productive activities would be possible solutions. The globalization of crime, as there is the globalization of the economy and of communication. So how? Well, new technologies. We might see the use of satellites and computers and internet leading to the rise of pornography, child pornography, and cyber stalking fraud. And we've seen examples of this already with the advent of more use of the internet and more creative ways that people have used the internet to perpetrate crimes. Okay, there we go. We're done through to week 11. I I think that's where we're at. Man, this semester's been going fast, so I hope you've enjoyed yourself, and good luck on the rest of the semester. We're almost there.